Why do the people closest to you suddenly change? Why does their warmth turn cold without warning? One day everything feels normal, safe. Then, without explanation, you're met with silence, avoidance, maybe even resentment. You didn't change toward them, but something in you did change, and that quiet shift, the growth you barely noticed within yourself, triggered a silent war you never saw coming. This isn't just about misunderstandings. It's deeper, psychological. And once you understand this, you'll never look at relationships the same way again. Because what's happening isn't about who you are now. It's about who others refuse to become. Carl Jung, the brilliant mind who explored the hidden depths of the human psyche, uncovered a truth so piercing it still holds up today. He revealed that human beings will go to great lengths, sometimes unknowingly, to avoid facing what he called the shadow, the darker, denied parts of their personality. When you begin to heal, when you start setting goals, finding clarity, or breaking free from old habits, you don't just change yourself. You change the reflection you offer to others. Suddenly, you become a mirror they can't ignore. And that reflection doesn't show them your success. It shows them their stagnation, their wounds, their unresolved pain. Imagine standing in front of a mirror and seeing everything you've avoided. That's how your growth looks to them. But here's what's even more shocking. Jung noticed that the moment you stop playing the version of yourself that others create in their minds, you unconsciously activate something he called projection. It's not that people hate you. It's that your transformation stirs their discomfort, and instead of facing that discomfort, they turn it outward, onto you. They begin projecting their fears, their failures, and their self-doubt. You're not being rejected because of who you are now. You're being rejected because of who they've chosen not to become. As Jung wisely stated, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But here's the hard truth. Most people aren't ready to look that deep. It takes courage to turn inward. So instead they lash out. They blame. They criticize. And you become the target. Not because you deserve it, but because you unknowingly held up a mirror too clear for them to bear. This is where your relationships begin to shift. Jung discovered that every person carries a shadow self, a hidden collection of traits, feelings, and identities they've either suppressed or flat out denied. But when you begin doing the inner work, when you stop apologizing for taking up space, when you stop trying to please everyone, when you draw lines and say no, you start to integrate your shadow. You become whole. You stop dimming your light. And that wholeness, it disturbs them. Because those who are still running from their shadow, who are still stuck in the illusion of who they think they should be, can't handle the presence of someone who's learning to be whole. Your growth feels like a threat, not because you're dangerous, but because your existence exposes their avoidance. Think about it. Your self-confidence only reminds them of their hidden insecurities. Your calm energy reflects back their internal chaos. Your ability to say no shines a spotlight on their lifelong pattern of saying yes to things they hate. But what's truly painful is this. Jung found that it's often your family and your closest friends, the very people who should celebrate your growth, who turn against you first. Why? Because they've known you as a version that served them. When you shift out of that role, you disrupt the identity they built around you. Jung called this process individuation, the powerful, sometimes painful journey of becoming your truest self, separate from what others expect or want from you. It's not rebellion, it's not arrogance, it's truth, and truth is threatening. According to Jung, individuation is essential for psychological well-being, but that same process makes others deeply uncomfortable, because as you peel off the layers of pretense and step into who you really are, you force them to see how much of their identity has been borrowed or artificial. It's not that they hate you, they hate that the real you proves the illusion they've been living is just that, an illusion. And here's where Jung's most revolutionary insight comes in, one that reveals why sometimes it's not just individuals who turn against you. Carl Jung said that we're all connected through what he called the collective unconscious, shared patterns of behavior and belief systems that keep societies functioning. It's an invisible web of inherited instincts, archetypes, and emotional blueprints, quietly shaping how we think, act, and relate to others. This system isn't just about preserving culture, it's about maintaining order. But there's a catch. This order depends on one thing: conformity. Societies, families, institutions, they thrive when people stay in line. They rely on individuals playing predictable roles, upholding long-standing beliefs, and obeying traditions without question. The moment someone begins to question, to resist, or worse, to change, they disturb the balance that everyone else depends on, often without even realizing it. So when you start to evolve, when you break free from these inherited mental scripts, when you stop repeating cycles of pain passed down through generations, when you refuse to play your part in the same old dysfunctional family patterns, you're not just healing yourself, you're shaking the very foundations of the system. It's like pulling one thread from a tightly woven fabric. Suddenly, the whole thing feels at risk of unraveling. According consciously, Jung observed that the collective unconscious will mobilize to bring the deviant back in line. That's why it can feel so overwhelming. Why so many people, friends, relatives, co-workers, seem to turn against you at once. It's not a coincidence. It's a defensive reaction, like antibodies rushing to isolate a perceived infection. You are no longer playing your assigned role, and that makes you a threat, not because of what you've done, but because of what you represent. And here's the part that stings the most. People will say, "You've changed," as if it's a crime, as if the natural evolution of your soul, your mind, your values, somehow offends them. But Jung understood why this happens, and his insight reveals something deeply unsettling. According to Carl Jung, we all wear masks, he called them personas, to help us navigate the social world. We wear one version of ourselves at work, another at home, and maybe a different one around old friends. These personas aren't inherently bad, they're a form of adaptation. But over time, people start to mistake the mask for their actual identity. They cling to it. They forget who they were before the performance began. So, when you stop wearing your mask, when you outgrow the version of yourself others are used to, it's not just confusing, it feels like loss. A kind of symbolic death. Not the death of you, but the death of who they projected you to be. And death, in any form, brings fear. Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Most people aren't ready for that kind of terror. They've spent years running from it, hiding behind carefully curated personas. So when your transformation forces them to feel what they've suppressed, they can't handle the mirror you've become. Instead of facing their fear, they turn on you. You become the villain in their story because your growth confronts the parts of them they can't yet accept. Now here's where Jung's understanding of human psychology goes even deeper and more uncomfortable. He discovered that each of us carries both masculine and feminine psychological traits. He called these inner forces the animus, masculine, and the anima, feminine. Regardless of gender, every person contains both energies. But society doesn't celebrate balance, it celebrates division. It encourages men to be assertive but not sensitive, women to be nurturing but not strong. It forces people to suppress half of their psyche just to fit in. And the cost? Fragmentation. People become split within themselves, unknowingly rejecting crucial parts of their identity. So when you begin to integrate both sides, when you allow yourself to be bold and kind, rational and intuitive, protective and vulnerable, you embody a kind of psychological wholeness that exposes other people's internal imbalance. Your harmony reveals their division. And that's why they lash out. Jung observed that people will attack the very qualities in you that they've forbidden in themselves. But wait until you understand what Jung called the transcendent function and why it makes you dangerous. This isn't just another psychological theory. It's a radical truth that redefines what it means to evolve as a human being. According to Carl Jung, True psychological growth doesn't happen by choosing one extreme over another. It happens through the transcendent function, a deep, often uncomfortable process that requires you to hold two seemingly opposite truths in tension until something entirely new is born from the conflict. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. Jung believed that when you're able to be both loving and boundaried, empathetic and detached, open yet discerning, you've accessed a level of consciousness that's rare, powerful, and almost impossible for others to categorize. Why? Because you're no longer easy to define. You don't fit into their neat little boxes of good or bad, right or wrong, weak or strong. You've stepped beyond those binaries. This transcendent consciousness is exactly what threatens others. You're no longer predictable, and that unsettles the people who rely on routine responses to feel secure. You're not reacting from wounds, habits, or fears anymore. You've risen above the unconscious scripts that most people follow without even realizing. And for those who are still trapped in the black and white thinking of either/or, your psychological flexibility feels threatening, almost alien. Imagine being surrounded by people who only see in two colors and you suddenly appear in full spectrum. To them, your presence doesn't inspire curiosity, it triggers fear. Because your freedom highlights their limitations. Here's what Carl Jung said that will change how you see every person who turned against you. He stated, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that privilege isn't handed to you freely, it comes with a price. And that price is often steep, the loss of everyone who is only attached to your mask, your persona, your carefully constructed false identity. They didn't love the real you, they loved who you were when you still played the role they needed. So when you finally step into your authentic self, when you shed the false skin and let your truth shine through, those people fall away, not because you pushed them out, but because they were never truly connected to you in the first place. The people who hate you now, they're not reacting to your transformation. They're reacting to the inner confrontation your transformation creates within themselves. You've become the embodiment of a choice they never made. Your healing reminds them of their wounds. Your growth reminds them they've stayed the same. And instead of letting that awareness inspire change, they turn it into resentment. Jung emphasized that individuation, the path of becoming your whole, authentic self, isn't just a personal evolution. It's a spiritual, psychological necessity. It's not optional if you want to live a meaningful, integrated life. And those who resist their own individuation often despise anyone who embraces it. And the hatred you're experiencing, don't mistake it for failure. It's not a sign that you've done something wrong. In fact, it's one of the clearest signs that you're on the right path. The only path that matters. The path back to yourself. Jung's words echo like a compass through the confusion. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. And that's exactly what you've done. You've torn down those barriers. You've integrated your shadow. You've transcended their projections. You've chosen authenticity over approval, and that alone makes you powerful in a way they can't tolerate. And that, according to the greatest psychologist who ever lived, is exactly why they can't stand you anymore. So the real question isn't, why do they hate me? It's, can I keep going in spite of that hate? Because your psychological evolution, your emotional freedom, depends on your answer. Because according to Carl Jung, your psychological evolution depends on it.